Carol Baskin killed her husband, whacked him. Can't convince me that it didn't happen. Fed them to tigers, they snacking. What's happening? Carol Baskin.
All right, so here we are at week 5. I'm not going to ask you to go out and find the killer of Carl Baskin's ex-husband, but we are going to look at something kind of similar in the theme of the idea of accusing people of something. This period we're going to look at is kind of a Cold War era issue called McCarthyism, when people became afraid that everyone was becoming a communist. So just to kind of quickly go through what you're going to have to do this week, it's a 4-day week. You have the video, which is an Ed puzzle that you can do, as well as a reading assignment. I'm not requiring you do both. You have to do at least one of those two. So you can either watch the video or you can do the reading assignment. The video has some questions you have to answer. So what was McCarthyism? Well, if you go into this assignment and you answer these 6 questions, you're going to read about something that you probably already read similar things about. Most of you read The Crucible this year, and The Crucible was written by this guy named Arthur Miller, who was accused as a Hollywood director of being a communist. And this all became something that a guy named Joseph McCarthy did during this time period, bringing people's names to this thing called the HUAC, or the House of Un-American Activities Committee, basically accusing people, which became part of the Hollywood scare, or what became the blacklisted Hollywood 10, were people who were basically saying that they were going out and trying to influence people of becoming communists. So this reading here just kind of goes through some of the background of what that Red Scare was. Now, one of the bad things about this COVID really for U.S. history was that typically we kind of participate in this really cool activity where we look at what McCarthyism was like and what that meant. And really it's kind of the same thing as at a lot of different levels in U.S. history. You'll take the quiz on Wednesday, which will look at some of those basic elements from the reading and McCarthyism. But the real assignment that, and I really urge a lot of you going into a little bit more depth of looking at what McCarthyism was. And basically this assignment is asking you to look at questions 1, 2 at the Britannica site, which is linked down here. It's a pretty simple site that says, go look at this biography and go through the idea of what McCarthyism was and who McCarthy was. Pretty simple. Question 3 gets in a little bit more depth, kind of looking at what the Reign of Terror was. And this is kind of a little further analysis of what this time period was looking at in what the Reign of Terror was, when this kind of pops up. And basically this idea is what you're looking for, the idea of how the government changed, and this is a little bit of a longer reading to help you answer that question, and led to this thing like the Hollywood blacklisting, and this idea of kind of fear changing things. And I think we're kind of living during a time period when this happened, but then even if you look at The Crucible, Arthur Miller was blacklisted because he was accused of being communist, so he wrote this story about a time in history when people were accused of being witches. Well, I mean, how do you prove that somebody's a witch? Just hint, hint. Witches don't really exist, or at least not in the way that they were explaining what a witch was back in Salem, back in the 1700s. But one of the cool things is this article that talks about the effects of McCarthyism and how it impacted Americans. We're living in a time period right now where people are basically, in some cases being accused of not following social distancing. And how is that being done? Well, this was an extreme time in American history where that fear of communism led to this idea of how were people being kind of perceived as a communist. And you can't prove if somebody's a communist. Communism is a belief in the way the government and our economy should run. So it's kind of a weird question of like, yeah, I could say you're a communist, but how do I prove that? What do I do? How do I make sure that you are a communist? So in this assignment, you're looking at not only answering these questions in some sort of format, you also have to do the OPVL. Hopefully many of you remember that from these sources. So you have to do at least an origin, purpose, value, limitation for at least one of those sources. And so you should answer all the questions and then do an OPVL for one of the sources that you used in answering this. So those are all due on Wednesday or Thursday, and then Friday is the test. And again, kind of the same way, that'll be open Friday morning and it'll last through Sunday. Please don't miss this. And then kind of the way that I've discussed with some people is that a part of this assignment will actually be involved in this summative eventually. So make sure that you do that. Otherwise, that's about it this week. Hopefully, if you have any questions, you will drop into my office hours.
What's up, Mr.